This video lecture is going to talk about schizophrenia and about developmental disorders of the brain. Now, schizophrenia is a mental disorder that is characterized by problems with thought processes and poor emotional response. And so, generally speaking, when we take a look at diagnosing a patient with schizophrenia, we tend to think of it as a disconnection from reality. The person has they suffer from thought blocking, which means they lose their train of thought. Um, Generally speaking, they're going to have uh, that inability to maintain a chain of thought. They're going to have communication issues, which would make total sense. Trying to talk to someone and then forgetting what you were just talking about or forgetting what they were just talking about, and which then also can lead to emotional control issues. You get upset and frustrated because, I was trying to think of something, I'm trying to explain something that's falling apart, and I need to explain it before I lose track of it. And so you can see how that could have tremendous impact upon someone. Obviously, this can all lead to making it difficult to maintain strong, good relationships. And I do admit that there are a number of people who have a diagnosis of schizophrenia that do control their emotions very well and do maintain good relationships. So I'm not trying to make it sound like, someone with schizophrenia, has all of these in deficits pure. I'm simply showing some of the most common signs and symptoms we see of a person diagnosed with schizophrenia. Now, to diagnose someone with schizophrenia, there are three things that have to be demonstrated for at least 6 months for a full diagnosis. The first are delusions. Now, delusions are false beliefs that the subject will not give up. They have a basis in reality, and so they have this false belief that is locked into something they will not let go. So an example, down the street, parked on the curb is a black van. And so I know for a fact the federal government is monitoring. And so I see that black van there all the time, and I know that's got to be the federal authorities, and they're beaming some kind of mind-altering rays at me, making it hard for me to be able to concentrate. And now the reality is that my neighbor down the street does indeed have a black van. So there is a physical vehicle there. And someone else will say, "Yeah, I see the black van, but she's a little old lady that uses it to deliver muffins that she makes, for local shelters." And I just absolutely no, 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 no. That's a fake. She's a pawn of this federal covert cabal that is treating. So that's where the delusions come in. Hallucinations are different. Hallucinations are unreal perceptions. There's no basis in reality. And so when I talk about the horses making noise outside all night long, it's hard for me to fall asleep because I hear the horses out there, and my neighbor, my friends all look outside. There's no animals at all. There's nothing making any kind of noise that can be interpreted as horses. Voices are a very common form of hallucination. You suddenly hear someone talking to you. You could have full conversations with someone. Now, the interesting thing is we said that with delusions, the subject will not relinquish them. They will not give them up. You can talk with them. You could walk them over, show them the black van, show them the interior. They're not going to let go. Hallucinations, very commonly, our patient will admit they understand it's not real. I hear the horses outside right now. They're making noises. And it may get to the point where I actually do acknowledge it's not real. But I can't let go of that perception. My brain is still trying to, locate that stimulus and try to analyze that, and it won't let me let go. Now, you need to also have a reduction in affect. Remember, the affect was that outward expression of your emotional state. And so reduction means that everything kind of gets muted down. And so a person who has a reduction in affect usually has a very muted personality. And so they tend not to have much in the way of response. There may be occasional flare-ups where they suddenly get very agitated about something. But no, generally speaking, it's a very muted, very reduced presentation, very reserved. A common trait you'll find is something referred to as anhedonia. Anhedonia. Um, Hedonism is enjoying something. You know, someone who's a hedonist really enjoys stuff tremendously. The an means no, and so an anhedonia refers to an inability to enjoy something. And we tend to find people with schizophrenia lose interest in stuff. They used to have a great interest in music or in art or in cooking or in physical exercise or in whatever. And they just start losing that. And they just, no, I just don't, just no, I just don't want to. Just, you know, just, no, it just doesn't interest me anymore. And so they start kind of closing themselves off. And that's where you see that reduction in affect. And so if you add in delusions and hallucinations and all of this lasts for at least 6 months, that's where you lead to a diagnosis of schizophrenia. As you read through the textbook, it's going to talk a little bit more about some other details. It's going to give you some of the most common signs and symptoms. Like I said, occasionally you may have some inappropriate reactions, and so part of the little crack in that shell of that reduced affect may pop out, where a person just has this very outward expression that seems to be inappropriate. Crying at a joke or laughing because they're so stressed out that this should be kind of a sad event. They just can't stop laughing. Just you can see a lot more of these kind of fit in, losing their connection to family and friends, avoiding contact with them simply because they understand things are going on, they're having a hard time making that connection, so it's easier just to cut ties with people. So that takes us through our schizophrenia. And so make sure you can understand the signs and symptoms and what goes into a proper diagnosis. The second category I want to talk about in this video lecture are developmental disorders. Now, this is where we have a physical change in the brain itself. And so a lot of these can be diagnosed using things like MRIs or CT scans. And so when we take a look at a developmental disorder, some kind of physical event, we may want to be able to see if something has caused this through trauma. If you have a developmental issue, if you had some type of traumatic event or drug exposure or pathogen exposure while you were in the womb developing, if there's a familial element, this could be a hereditary element that you inherited from one of your parents. It could be something that developed living in a family that caused you to have a trauma or a nutritional deficit. And so there's a lot of things that can play into this type of disorder. There's several categories, and so we'll look at, or subcategories of this. And the first one we'll talk about is called intellectual disability. The old-fashioned term was mental retardation, and that's out of favor. And so now we say intellectual disability. This is very simply a physical limitation in cognition or their thinking process. Something has caused them to not have full access or full development of their frontal lobe. They may have, a sixth grade cognitive level when they're an adult, and they simply don't have full capacity, intellectually speaking. Dementia is a deficit in memory, language, or mood. And so if you have had some trauma that has caused you to lose memories, you develop an anterograde amnesia, or you develop a language deficit, you get something like Broca's aphasia, or you get Wernicke's aphasia. These can be significant forms of dementia. And so aphasia, that term I just used a moment ago, aphasia, aphasia, refers to a loss of language. And so when we take a look at Broca's aphasia, The Broca's area in the brain is the structure that helps you to present speech. It's what I'm using right now to turn thoughts into words. Whereas Wernicke's aphasia, the Wernicke's area in the brain is what you use to turn words into thoughts. What you're using now, when you hear me speak, you're hearing those words and your brain is now turning them into thoughts that you can follow. Well, if we damage one of these structures, Broca's aphasia means that I would not be able to express myself. Stuttering can be an example of a Broca's aphasia. Wernicke's aphasia is the fact that you would not understand something. So if you've had a stroke and damaged Wernicke's area and you're trying to understand someone and you've lost comprehension of a whole lot of terms. And so when they're talking about we're going to have lunch today and we're going to have casserole, and you look at them and what's that? Well, it's a dish with, meat and cheese and sauces and well, yeah, and so and they might even be able to remember and picture it, but the word casserole just doesn't sound familiar at all, doesn't register. They're like, well, okay, you like a lasagna. Well, yes, exactly right. And so, okay, all right, but why the hell did you call it? What was that word? And so that's where we try to figure out what has happened to the individual. One example we see in dementia is oops, make sure I spell this right. Yeah, there we go. Alzheimer's disease is a senile dementia. And when we say senile, means that it progresses with age. And so the dementia was the deficit that progresses with age. Some people can suffer a senile dementia and not have Alzheimer's, but if you have Alzheimer's, then that is, the major form of senile dementia. And so a person with Alzheimer's, they start losing language abilities. They may start losing memories. They may start losing the ability to be able to make connections and have some of that thought blocking like we talked about. Very commonly, people with Alzheimer's also suffer what is called sundowning. Sundowning means a disorientation at sunset. And so there's something about the change in the light in the environment that can disorient the person and cause them to really, have a hard time maintaining a train of thought, be able to access memories. And so this is why a lot of people with Alzheimer's, they go out to get the mail at the end of the day. They walk out to the corner, out to the curb, they pull the mail out of the mailbox, they turn around, and they don't recognize their house. And so now they get disoriented thinking, oh, did I walk away from my house? So I'll head off that way. And if you ask them to describe the house, they probably can't tell you. It's a white house with red trim. It's got a couple of big green bushes in front and some blue flowers. You mean like that one? That's not my house. And they just, they don't recognize, they don't make that visual connection. They've lost part of that memory, so now they suffer that dementia part. And so that's where they just go wandering off trying to find their house and they get lost. And so if you care for a person with Alzheimer's, usually sundown is the time when you pay a little extra attention, keep an eye on them, because that's usually when they get very disoriented, may get very emotional, very upset, very frustrated. It kind of really spikes things up at that time. We can talk about a tic disorder. Now, a tic, as you see on the screen there, is defined as a sudden, rapid, involuntary movement or vocalization. And so if your patient has this involuntary vocalization that just kicks out, and they may be fully aware, they know they're doing it, and they just kind of frustrates them a little bit and try to get away from it. Or they may have a little bit of a motor action. They may have a little bit of an action that just keeps hitting over and over again. And then, like I said, they're fully aware of it. It's not like they don't know what's going on. And so it can be very frustrating. You hear about people who suffer Tourette's syndrome. That's the one that the movies and TV shows always love to play with. And so an example of a tic disorder is, again, make sure you spell this correctly. Yeah, one R. Tourette's syndrome. Tourette's syndrome, this one has a number of physical or vocal tics. You almost never see both. It's usually one or the other. They'll have a lot of throat clearing over again, a lot of just eye blinking that is just excessive. The movies and TV shows love to have, the part of, person blurting out curse words without being able to control themselves. And there are examples of that, but there's so many other examples of Tourette's syndrome that don't have to be just someone, throwing out curse words all over the place. They'll just simply have these tics that just simply show up and they don't have an ability to be able to control it. A number of children can go through a phase of what's called transient tic disorder. And so that may be just little things that they do all the time. And so they'll sit there and they'll crack a knuckle, the same knuckle all the time, lick their lips all the time, pop the lips all the time. Like I said, do some of that blinking action. But a lot of times that transient tic disorder may come in for a while and disappear for a while. We don't fully understand, if there was something just going through developmental changes during puberty that caused a little bit of basal nuclei function to kind of go a little off, that may cause this to occur. Most commonly, the people will grow out of it. Some people may develop a chronic tic disorder where they have one of these tics that just occur for years and years and years. A colleague of mine would have that eye just kind of sit there and just do that big twitch over and over again while they're lecturing. And, and talk with the students, and the students understood. And so just, the students kind of learned to like mentally ignore that and could, address the instructor and talk to them and have a great course experience, as long as you're aware of what's going on. Back to our examples of developmental disorders, excuse me, we can talk about, excuse me, I'm not doing that to make a point, that's just a little bit of a dry throat. Disruptive behavior disorder. Generally speaking, this is damage to the amygdala, and the amygdala tends to control our rage or anger. And so people who may have anger issues may be very aggressive, antisocial, to the point where it's causing disruption in their lives. And so these people may be, absolutely defiant to the point of just not getting anything done. Very belligerent, very angry, very antisocial. Chronic alcohol abuse can usually damage the amygdala, so this is very common in people who suffer from chronic alcoholism. Substance abuse disorders can also kick into a lot of this as well. Sensory integration disorder. This is a problem with the thalamus. The thalamus is the brain structure that helps us to receive sensory input and sort it correctly to the brain, knowing that visual information goes here, auditory goes here, tactile goes here. I'll throw this in as a quick plug. Remember that I have that PowerPoint review in the last week's module that reviewed some of the brain structures. So it might be a good idea to go back and review that to refresh your knowledge and memory of various brain structures. We'll be referring to some of those throughout the course of this chapter. A person with sensory integration disorder, as it says, they misprocess stimuli. And so something may be bad and it feels good. And so someone who bites their tongue to the point of drawing blood may actually get a positive, enjoyable sensation from that. You'll get some people who will sit there and burn their fingertips with matches. There's an enjoyable aspect to that. Some people may wind up having a very negative feel towards something. You'll get some people who have real, just almost visceral reaction to certain types of fabrics, silks or fleece. Some people will just, oh God, it feels like it's just burning my skin up. Oh my God, I can't stand it, can't stand it, can't stand it. And so they're having some kind of abnormal sensory perception. And so that's our sensory integration disorder. Autism spectrum disorder. Now, this is going to be an imbalance of the reticular formation. The reticular formation is a structure in the brain that helps us to be able to sort out information in terms of priority and volume. And so this allows you to pay attention to me talking to you through this video. Meanwhile, there's something else going on in your home. There's sights, there's sounds, there's smells, there's taste, there's all sorts of things going on. There's the textures, there's the temperature of the room, but you're able to focus on what I'm saying right now because your reticular formation kind of mutes everything around you so you can stay focused. You can provide that attention. Someone with autism spectrum disorder, they show an extreme sensitivity. And so they wind up developing an almost tunnel vision perspective. And so they will wind up having such a locked in perception that if they were watching this video and someone walks by and is talking to them, they do not register that at all. To the extent that it's not like they're just really concentrated. I mean, they just almost like, the reticular formation shuts that off completely. And you almost have to go up and, thump them on the shoulder to, try and get their attention because they're so locked into that. Yeah, social limitations. That makes sense. It's hard for an individual like this to be able to interact with people because they may wind up getting distracted by something. And... What? Oh, the teacher's still talking. Sorry, and so you can appreciate where, the social interactions can be very difficult if they keep getting just dragged off into a different direction. Compare that to attention deficit hyperactive disorder, ADHD. And I do know there are other examples of just ADHD or ADD. Let's just go ahead and pick this as one group. Bear with me. This is also reticular formation. The difference, however, is whereas with autism spectrum disorder, the reticular formation is too powerful, it's over focusing. With attention deficit hyperactive disorder, the reticular formation is underperforming. And so now they lack focus because everything is bright and loud. Give you an example of what I'm talking about. Imagine if you were facing all these different TVs, each showing a different channel, a different program at any one time. And you want to focus on the program right here that's showing the history of the American flag. And as you watch that, your reticular formation would do this. A normal reticular formation would dim everything else so you're peripherally aware of it, but you can focus on that one event going on. Someone with ADHD, this is what you see, this is what you hear. Now it's like so big and bright and loud that, trying to sit there and pay attention to that, and suddenly you notice, oh my God, what's this? Oh, I gotta pay attention. Oh my God, look at that. I'm supposed to be paying, oh my God, look, and so you're bouncing all over the place. This is what you get with autism spectrum disorder. And so this is where everything else just shuts off to the point that you only see that one thing. You only notice that one thing. And so between autism spectrum disorder and ADHD, you can see how that reticular formation is not working quite well. For a lot of people with ADHD, they get diagnosis, we give them things like Adderall or Ritalin. And that's a stimulant that helps that reticular formation to work a little stronger, helping you to now be able to work on focusing some of that material, some of that stimuli coming in so you can stay focused on one thing. All right, I flung you through a major set of developmental disorders. We took a look at our intellectual disability, dementia, tic disorders, disruptive behavior disorders, sensory integration disorder, autism spectrum disorder, and attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Take your time watching through this video several times, read through the textbook. Let me know if you have any questions. Good luck.